All right, guys, we're joined by firearms expert. Is that what I'm supposed to say? Firearms expert Schuyler
Oh,
Robertson, right? I get that
yes,
right?
you did. Yeah,
Okay,
firearms expert, use of force expert.
use of force expert. And what exactly is a firearms expert? How does one become an expert in this field?
I started in the military. I joined the Army right out of high school. And of course, was trained and got a lot of experience there. I became an NRA firearms instructor. I became, um, I started after, in 2016, I started contracting with the government overseas. I went to Afghanistan, Iraq, a bunch of other countries. I worked for, did State Department contracts as a protective security specialist doing diplomatic security. So over the years, I've accumulated a lot of courses and got to the point where attorneys reached out to me. I started writing for Concealed Carry magazine, and I had an attorney reach out to me and said, "Hey, I've got a case that I need an expert witness for who can discuss lawful use of force
Okay.
to a jury."
Did you have to take a this is so stupid, but did you have to take a test or an exam to pass, or just because you have an extensive experience with firearms and with the knowledge of it, they just deemed you an expert?
I submitted my resume with my report, and an expert witness resume is more of a functional resume, but it detailed all my experience, my time as an instructor in the military. And so I submitted that. The district attorney, when he got my report from the defense attorney, looked at it and goes, "Yeah, we're just going to concede that this guy's an expert." I've never actually been what they call voir dired. That's where, because the voir dire a witness is to make sure, does this guy really know about? Every case I've been on so far, the opposing counsels just looked at my resume and go, "Yeah, we can see this guy's an expert."
Okay. When you joined the military, I mean, geez, how old are you? When was it when you joined the military?
I went to basic training in 1986.
86. Okay. And did you end up seeing any? You might have said it, but did you see any combat?
I deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan with the
You did. Well,
military.
thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
I mean, and did I read that you were when you came back at some point? Were you a deputy or what do they call that? Yeah, a deputy, right?
Yeah,
Were you a sheriff's deputy?
yeah. I took a break-in service from the military, and I was a deputy sheriff in Colorado for 5 years.
Do you get elected, or when you're a no, you get deputized, right? Is
Right.
that how that works?
You, it's just like applying for a job with a police department. You go. For me, it took about eight or 9 months of background check, psychological testing before I got to the academy, and the academy was 4 months long.
Okay. Have you ever been have you ever been hit by a bullet? Have you ever been shot?
Yes, um, it was a accident at a training range.
That all right, so I get it. And I read an article. We'll get into that, but I read an article about that you wrote about misfires and how to the pressure that someone that's not trained might scramble because they don't know how, like, if the gun malfunctioned. Did the gun malfunction on you, or was it somebody else?
It was it was my gun. I was reholstering and it fired. I think because we were in civilian clothes, I think a piece of clothing got into the trigger guard
Okay.
and it fired. Um, because I do not believe I had my finger on the trigger while I was reholstering.
Okay. Did it hurt?
But
I mean, did it of course it hurt,
it
but like how did it
actually
feel?
it felt like getting hit with a wet towel. Like when someone pops you with a towel, that's what it felt like. And
And
I didn't realize I'd been shot. I looked and go, okay, there's a hole in my pants. Okay, there's two holes in my pants.
what's
And
did
I
two
was
rounds
more,
go off?
no, one round, it was an entrance and an exit.
Okay. Oh.
And I'm looking, and I was upset because these were brand new pants.
Yeah.
Like I had
You're
just
pissed you
put them,
ruined the Wranglers.
yeah, I just put them on that day. And one of the range safeties came up and he goes, "Yep, there's blood coming out of both holes. You just got shot." I'm like, "No."
Wow, that's what kind of gun was it? Like, how big was the bullet?
It was a Glock Model 22, which fires a 40 caliber Smith and Wesson round.
Okay. And how did you know what? This might help before we get into the discussion about law. How does a gun exactly work? I mean, I get the understand. Listen, I get it. Load it, pull the trigger, it fires. But how does it actually? How do you go from loading a musket with gunpowder and shooting a projectile to what we have today?
It's basically the same thing, except in the 1860s, a gentleman, I believe his name was Dan Wesson. I think it was him that created it. He actually created the 22 bullet where, because at the time people were using like a paper patch and pouring powder down the barrel and then putting the ball in. And he's like, you know what? If we could self-contain this, because they were already using percussion caps,
Okay.
which is a small brass cap with fulminated mercury in it. And you put that on a nipple that gets hit by the hammer, and which causes a spark. The spark travels to where the powder is, ignites it, and the burning powder sends it down the barrel where the path of least resistance is. He said, why don't we contain it so you have a brass cartridge that has the primer already attached, a pre-measured powder already there, and the projectile. And he created the first modern metallic cartridge.
So I'm curious, could anything fire the bullet? Like if I hit the back of a bullet with a nail and a hammer, would that be
Yes.
enough that would
Yes.
fire it?
That would, if you hit the percussion cap.
Yep, that's the little. I've seen bullets before, like the little
Yeah.
dot. Looks like a
On
battery end.
yeah, it.
Oh, he's got the bullets.
Hold on. Let me.
Don't shoot yourself.
I'm not.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, this is unloaded now, but this is a single round of ammunition. So in here,
Yep,
that
there it is.
circle in the middle is a percussion cap.
Okay.
So the firing pin will strike it. And inside this portion is the powder. And here's the bullet. The bullet actually goes to about here inside the cartridge.
Okay. So they don't explode. The bullet, the projectile, I don't know anything about guns, right? The projectile doesn't explode. Like once I get that it fires it.
There is an explosion inside here.
Okay.
But it's all contained because the powder ignites and burns very rapidly.
Gotcha.
And the expanding gases need a place to go. So the path of least resistance is down the barrel of the gun.
Gotcha.
And that sends the bullet out the barrel. The bullet for modern firearms, they have what's called rifling inside the barrel, which are grooves that are cut in, which impart spin, which helps to stabilize the bullet in flight. The old style muskets didn't have that, but the Kentucky long rifle used in the Revolutionary War actually did have a rifled barrel.
Great. That dating that far back.
Yes.
So, speaking of the Revolutionary War, speaking of muskets, and there's so much talk about the Second Amendment and the federal government and Joe Biden wanting to ban an AR-15 or assault, what they would call an assault weapon or assault rifle or semi-automatic guns. Before we get into that part of it, as you read it, what does the Second Amendment mean? How should people be interpreting the Second Amendment?
Well, the U.S. Supreme Court just did an interpretation last summer where they said, yes, the Second Amendment is for personal, it applies to the people, not the government. And just like every other one of the amendments in the Bill of Rights, it tells the government what they cannot do. The government cannot restrict free speech. They cannot force you to have a certain religion. They can't stop you from peaceably assembling. Mm-hmm. And they cannot And the right of the people to keep and bear arms cannot be infringed. It is a personal right. And when people talk about, well, because there's the reason for it, the first part of the amendment is a well-regulated militia being necessary for the protection of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Some people interpret that to mean, well, that's the right of a state to have a militia, the National Guard.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look in, I don't have the ordinances in front of me, but in the US Code that talks about the different types of the militia. There's the unorganized militia, which is every able-bodied male from 16 to 70 you're the unorganized militia. Then there's the organized militia, being the National Guard and the Army Reserve, and then the full-time military.
Okay.
But the Supreme Court unequivocally ruled that the Second Amendment applies to individuals, not some government right to have a state militia.
All right. Now, wait. So let's talk about how do you decide what guns people, an everyday person, should have? How do you decide that? I mean, outside of, let me just say this, outside of them being a criminal, let's say you're a law-abiding citizen. Who gets to decide, hey, you know what? You can't have a tank, but you can have a Glock.
That's somewhat of a contentious debate. There are some people that say you can, and actually you can own a tank as long as the main gun's been disabled, if it won't fire, because the projectiles for a tank are typically considered a destructive device. But during the Revolutionary War, private citizens could own cannons.
Really? Could you imagine having a cannon in your front yard?
Yeah, there were.
Get off my lawn!
During the siege of Boston, there was a guy who had a couple of cannons, and he donated them to the Continental Army.
To the cause. Well, you know what? Speaking of that, right, and this is going to get us off track really quick. Wouldn't the federal government want private citizens to have these weapons in case there was ever a war here? Like, I mean, you have 300 million, well, I guess that there's not that many adults. Let's say you have 100 million adults living in the United States. If they had some kind of a gun or a weapon to protect the country, wouldn't the government want that? I feel like that. I mean, I understand how it's a threat to the government because you could overthrow it. But if a war came here,
if a war came here, yes, it does make sense as long as people are trained, they know how to use it, they know how to store it safely. But famously, when you read about after the invasion of or the attack on Pearl Harbor, they asked the Japanese admirals at the end of the war, because the United States was terrified that the Japanese was going to land in California.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, why didn't you guys land troops? And they said, because the U.S. Army could not have responded to a Japanese invasion of the mainland. This is before we had the highway system implemented. Eisenhower, as a young officer, I think it was in the 20s, it took them 3 months to go on back roads from the East Coast to the West Coast. And they said, why didn't you guys, the Army couldn't have responded. You guys knew that. And this Japanese admiral said, there would have been a rifle behind every blade of grass. Every farmer would have been out there shooting at us. During the 30s, the German intelligence did an analysis of Switzerland. And they wanted to know, could we invade Switzerland? And they determined, if we did a blitzkrieg attack, we could take out the Swiss military fairly quickly. But they noted every village had a 300-meter rifle range that was used for matches every weekend. The average Swiss person had about a year's worth of food stored up. And they said, we cannot survive a siege. Every town would be a sniper's paradise. And the military was not the threat. It was the citizenry with rifles.
So it's almost a matter of national security to not keep guns out of law-abiding citizens' hands by the people that should be able to have them. You get, like, it's a deterrent.
I do. And it's also a deterrent for if the government becomes tyrannical. If the government says, you know what, we're going to suspend your civil rights. You no longer have the right, if they said the military is going to be the new law enforcement, you no longer have a right to be safe from searching your home. We can search your home at any time without a warrant.
Yeah, you don't. Go ahead.
If the government became tyrannical to that extent, like if we were living in a society like Russia, China, or any of the other governments out there today, which routinely crush their citizens' rights. Well, okay, citizens have firearms, which people, like Biden has said, oh, you can't defeat the military with an AR-15. You need an F-15 fighter plane. No, you wouldn't. Look at the Taliban in Afghanistan. Look at the Viet Cong.
Well, I mean, geez, if every American, had a gun, you could easily save yourself from tyranny. Which I kind of ties in what you just said to me. My mind just almost went. So what you just told me is Japan didn't attack the mainland because the American citizens had too many guns. They were like, hey, if we attack, we're going to get rushed with more guns than their military has.
Right.
So then
during the Battle of Britain, the United States, just private citizens, sent literally tons of firearms and ammunition to the British citizens because they were afraid the Nazis were going to invade mainland England. And Churchill put out a call and he said, we need help. If they land, we can't arm ourselves. Look at last year, what happened in Ukraine. The Ukrainian government says, oh crap, we're about to, we're invaded by the Russians. And they started passing out guns to their citizens. Like, here's an AK, here's an RPG. Here's a quick class on how to use it.
So when you think of it that way, and other countries wouldn't attack us because our citizens are armed, the only thing that comes to my head is, well, why does Joe Biden want to take our guns away then? Because he knows that once he takes our guns away, we have no way to defend ourselves if the government decided to be a one-party system and decide, or whatever it is, it just decided, hey, you know what, we took over. Now you have no way to defend yourself. Yeah, you have a couple of slingshot guns, like no real guns to defend yourself.
Right. You would be at the mercy of the government and at the mercy of criminals because criminals are not going to turn their guns in.
No.
Criminals, by definition, do not obey laws. I ran into a lot of people who had felony convictions who were still carrying guns because, they're gangbangers. That's what they do. They break laws.
How are they getting them? How do the criminals get? Because it seems to me that in the news, every time somebody gets shot, of course, congressmen and women are right to immediately saying ban guns. But then you look and you're like, wait, this was like a thug that had the gun. This was a mentally disturbed person that stole his father's gun or something like that. How are they getting them?
Well, you just gave the answer right there. Most of the time, criminals get their guns by stealing them. And a lot of times that's because the gun owner did not lock them up. And a lot of states are trying to, which I kind of agree with this. A lot of states are pushing now. Oregon just did about a year or so ago, saying, unless your gun is being used, you have to have it locked up. And if your gun gets stolen, you have to report it to the police.
Okay. I get now. I don't own a gun, and I've never had anybody break. You know what? Actually, as a kid, I had someone break into my house, and I at 14, and I chased them out of my house with a kitchen knife for my mom. But I was scared to hell, and the guy was just drunk. No big deal. But now someone breaks into the house. How are the gun owner supposed to defend their family if they gotta like say, "Hey, sir, well, give me 1 sec. Let me open up my safe. Let me put my gun together. Let me take it out of the gun bag."
Um, well, there's two theories. One is uh, keep your gun on you, which, I get up in the morning, I put my gun on because, most home invasions happen between 3 in the afternoon and 9 in the evening.
Okay.
That's when people are home.
Okay.
So, and I don't think I'm being paranoid. I think I'm being realistic. Now, there's also a difference between having a gun stored versus having a gun staged. My interpretation of the law in Oregon is if your gun is staged, it's being used. But you still have a responsibility. And here's the thing a lot of people don't think about: rights and responsibilities go hand in hand. You can't have power without having responsibility with it. And having a firearm gives a person a lot of power.
Okay.
But the responsibility is to make sure that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands, whether that's a toddler, whether that's a thief. So there are a lot of different options. There are gun safes that you can keep by your bedside that they're a combination lock, and you can either get them with a biometric fingerprint reader, or just they have a handprint and you press the buttons in a certain combination and it unlocks.
To get to it, what can we just go back real quick? What is the difference between staged and stored? Because I
Well,
don't know.
storing a gun would be you're not intending to use it. It's so you put it away for long-term storage in the gun safe. Um, a gun that's staged would be one that if something goes bump in the night, this is what you're grabbing, and you have it in a location where you can get to it quickly. An authorized person, you, your spouse, if your children are old enough and they've been trained, they can get it. But a thief or a toddler can't get to it.
Okay. All right, I can understand that. What I don't know what it's like in Massachusetts if you have to have it in a safe or not. Um, but I guess the likelihood of, or you know what, here, more importantly, let me ask you this: someone does break into your house, right? What's the thing you should be doing? Should you be going for your gun, or should you be going for let's get the kids out of the house? Let me grab my baseball bat. What should you do when someone breaks into your house?
Um, First thing is get the cavalry moving. So if you have an alarm, hit your alarm, hit the panic, make a 911 call. Hopefully, like in my case, my wife would be doing that while I'm throwing on body armor and grabbing a rifle.
Okay.
Then I would go to, we have the way our house is set up and the way most houses are set up, the bedrooms are all kind of co-located on one end of the house.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go out far enough to be able to cover family members behind me moving into the bedroom. And we would, um, tell them, hey, Alamo, that's our code word. That if you hear me in the middle of the night yelling Alamo, it means as quickly as you can get to the bedroom. I'm not going to go trying to clear my house. Once everybody's located is back in the master bedroom, you close the door, lock it, and wait.
Wait for the police.
Wait for the police. There's nothing in my house worth me getting killed over. That's what insurance is for.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, and plus you have now when I said hit the alarm and make a 911 call, that does two things. It's going to get the cops moving, but also you have a backup communication plan. Most residential alarm activations are accidental, and the police know it. So if they get a call from your alarm company that says, hey, we just got a panic alarm at this address, the cops are going to head that way, but it's not going to be a priority. If they get an alarm call and a 911 call from the same address, they know this is an in progress. We need to lights and sirens get there quickly.
I get it.
But
Yeah,
now,
yep, go ahead.
When you think about it from a police officer's standpoint, they know there's bad guys, at least one, inside the residence. They may not know what he looks like, what he's armed with, how he's dressed. If they run into me and think I'm the bad guy, there's a really good chance I'm going to get shot.
That's a good point.
I'm going to stay. The plan is everybody's going to stay in the bedroom. When the police arrive, one good trick is, well, not a trick, but have you a spare set of keys connected to a chem light. So especially if you're on a top floor, you can tell the police, hey, I'm going to throw the keys out the window. And when you see the officer, you toss him out. That way he doesn't have to kick your door in. But also have your interior doors, solid core doors with a deadbolt. With, most of the equipment, like the strike plates on a door frame, they use like 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch screws.
Mm-hmm.
Go to Home Depot, get some 2-inch or 3-inch screws that'll go into the drywall so that your door can withstand a kick. Because, yeah, somebody's going to be able to get in eventually.
Yep.
But it's, the difference between maybe it takes them a minute or two to get in versus 5 seconds to get in.
What if you don't have a gun? Like, what's your best chance to survive? Is basically, do you do the same thing if I don't have a gun, and I think someone broke into my house and I think they have a gun, maybe they even shot around, and I'm like, oh my God, this guy has a gun. What do I do? Do I get my family into that bedroom, or do I get my family like, hey, we're jumping out of a window. Let's get the hell out of here.
You may have to. Yeah, it may be we need to run. You're going to have to make that decision when the moment happens, because maybe they're just looking to steal something and they don't care about you, or maybe this is the voices in this person's head told them, hey, go to this house and kill everybody.
Right.
You don't know, but you're going to have to make that decision. Years ago in Josephine County, Oregon, the sheriff's department ran out of money, and they told everybody, we need this ballot measure for a property tax increase so we can keep patrol service. If we don't get it, we're going to have to cut patrol service. Because a lot of people don't realize a county sheriff, excuse me, their main job that they're by statute required to do is to maintain the county jail. Patrol services are an extra service they provide.
Okay.
And this county had to stop patrol. And a woman called 911 and said, my ex-boyfriend's trying to break in. And the dispatcher had to tell her, we have no officers to send. They said, we've contacted the state police. And state police, most of the time, they're doing traffic enforcement. That's all they do.
That's all they do in Massachusetts. No, they're good people. They're good people. Yeah. I'm not shitting on them.
But it's and especially if you live in a rural area, like in this case, there were a couple of state patrol officers who were over 100 miles away. And they're
Oh
like,
my God.
they're en route as fast as they can, but it's going to take them an hour and a half to get to you.
Easily. Yep. Wow.
When I was a cop, I worked in a rural county, and well, not rural, but El Paso County, Colorado. We had mountains. So to the west, you have the mountains, then you have Colorado Springs, and out east, you have flat farmland. Doing a patrol in the mountains, your nearest backup might be 2 hours away.
Huh.
So now in this case, this woman, the dispatcher is telling her, "Do you have a gun?" She's like, "No, I don't." Well, hide. Can you get out of the house? Can you hide? Do something. So that's a decision you're going to have to.
That's like, what about, is there ever a scenario where you should engage with the person that has a gun and you don't?
If that's your only choice.
And that is basically, you're a rat in the corner and you have your only option of escaping here is to try to lunge at the guy and get, I mean, which, I mean, have you seen the
Yeah,
videos on YouTube where like you have some speaker and he's like, "Hey, if you get within like an inch of me, I could take the gun from you." Like, can that really happen? I can't, an average Joe can't do that. You can't do it,
it. Yeah, you're probably going to get shot.
right?
If Yeah, if you don't have a gun and someone with a gun breaks into your house or confronts you in a parking lot, trying to fight them, you're probably going to get shot.
But is that
Running,
all right, Ronan, go ahead.
yeah, running is probably your best option.
And are you supposed to, this is so stupid, but I always hear things you're supposed to run in a zigzag pattern. Is that true, or should you just bolt as fast as you can behind something?
I'd try to get behind something. Um, yeah, the engine block of a car, a brick wall, something that's going to stop a bullet. Um, but yeah, taking on someone with a gun without one, it's probably not going to have a good outcome for you.
So now let's say you're really tight with somebody. Let's say someone's got you, they're face to face with you, and the typical, like you might see it in the movie, and they got the gun like an inch from your head. At that point, should you be thinking this guy's gonna, other than the fact, let's say he's a complete nut, right? He's doesn't want your money, he just wants to kill you. At that point, are you trying to move the gun to try to take one in the arm? What do you do in that situation?
I'm going to try to get my head out of the line of fire. And at that point, yeah, if I was not armed or if I'd been disarmed, I'd try to grapple with him and try to get control of the gun. But again, that's something. When I was a deputy, we were trained in weapon retention and using what they call a red gun. It's a plastic gun that's bright orange that looks and feels the same, but it's cannot fire anything. It has no moving parts. But even training with those, it can be a toss up over who gets control. It's not something that you can just watch a couple of videos and go, okay, I got this. It would be something that you would have to train repeatedly on.
It has to be second nature. I mean, I'm sure you have to. It's
Yeah.
like anything. You probably have to do it 10,000 times. Not only that, I'm guessing that the average person would freeze immediately if someone put a gun in their face. They'd probably wouldn't. I mean, the panic would. They wouldn't even think to do anything. And you probably only
Yeah.
have like a split second to be like, I'm hitting this gun out of the guy's hands or I'm tackling him. Otherwise, you're done. I can't
Yeah.
even imagine.
Yeah. I can't either. That would be a worst case scenario. Hopefully, you'd be able to see something coming, some kind of sign that this guy was unhinged and avoid the confrontation. And if somebody starts, like, tries to start a conflict with you, don't engage. Don't, and especially if you do have a concealed firearm, and some guy in a parking lot is yelling at you, calling you all kinds of names, whatnot. Just, hey, sorry I offended you. If I did something to piss you off, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Yeah, so it's better to not get, yeah. And nowadays you never know. I remember when I was a kid, it was, I could get in a dust up with somebody and I didn't have to worry about that kid stabbing me. It'd just be a fight. We
Right.
fought and then we shook. Now I'm like with my son, I'm like, hey, if anybody wants to fight you, just don't, because you don't know if the kids don't fight like that anymore. I tell them, I'm like, bud, they're gonna pull a knife on you, and worse, they might go home and take their dad's gun and shoot the friggin' school up.
And and also what happens if it becomes a fight, even if it's just a fist fight? You punch the other person, their head hits the concrete, and now they've got a brain injury.
Yeah.
Guess who's going away
Yeah,
for
you're
assault?
you're going away, and the kid's going to juvie, and he's gonna be, yeah, that's
Yeah. And,
it's tough.
let's say you have a gun, you've been trained, you've got a permit, you're legally carrying, and some guy in a parking lot just starts calling you every name under the book. At that point, your best thing to do is to walk away. Um, there's another police writer, a guy named Masad Ayub. He's been writing books. He's been a reserve officer for decades. What he recommends is take a $20 bill, wrap it up, use a rubber band and secure it to a book of matches to give it a little bit of weight. And if somebody confronts you and just starts trying to pick a fight with you, show them the $20, toss it to them and say, hey, I'm sorry I pissed you off. Here, go have a couple beers on me.
It's not a bad idea.
Because you're better off trying to de-escalate. I am working a couple of cases right now for attorneys where their clients yelled back. They got in a verbal confrontation and the other person decided to assault them, and it turned into they had to use lethal force. But at that point, like, it can be argued, okay, this was mutual combat that got out of hand. Your self-defense claim can be eroded by that.
But before you move on from that, a lot of people, there's a lot of states that don't. Can you explain mutual combat? And like for example, I know Texas allows two guys to fight if they agree. Can you kind of explain that to people that might not? When you say mutual combat, they don't understand that you can legally fight in some states.
In some states, I know, yeah, Texas is one where if two people decide, okay, we're going to go outside and settle our disagreement mano a mano, that's legal. But in a lot of states, that's mutual assault.
Right.
They don't. And if you do, he's assaulting you, you're assaulting him, cops are going to probably pepper spray both of you, and you're both going to end up in handcuffs. If it gets out of hand, or if there's an unintended result, you punch the guy and a blood vessel bursts in his brain and he drops dead. Now you're going away for manslaughter.
You never think of that in the moment.
And the two cases I'm working now, both of these guys have been in jail for over 2 years without a trial.
Oh, it's a long time.
It's a very long time. It used to be you had to have a speedy trial within a year unless you waived your rights. Because of COVID, that's been ignored. So these guys have been sitting in jail for 2 years, not earning money, not being able to support their family. They're probably going to lose every penny they've ever worked with or that they've worked for legal fees, because they decided to get verbal back with someone. And in one of the cases, I don't want to go into too many details here, but somebody was being a jerk. He called him out for being a jerk, and it's the kind of thing almost anybody would go, no, you were doing this. And the guy's like, oh, I wasn't doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy baited him into, it just got verbal. And then the other guy decided to start throwing punches. And it escalated to the point where the defendant had to use his gun to save his life. But is it worth it? I mean, this started out as just a verbal conflict. You're arguing over nothing. And so what if a jury 2 years later goes, yeah, you were totally right in what you did.
Right. For 2 years, you've been gone.
Yeah, you've been in jail for 2 years. You have no money, no job. Now what? You have to literally start from nothing.
I do that all the time with my wife. You know that? All the time with my wife. Like, my wife will chuck something at me, and then I'll just chuck it back, and then it's a huge beef. People can't walk away.
Yeah.
It's so tough to just turn the other cheek and say, hey, hit me on the other side here. Do you feel better now? Here's a 20 and go buy a drink. That's tough.
And to be able to walk away, but that's the discipline you have to have, because if you don't, if you are, because this is going to be presented to a jury in the light that makes you the worst. You were an out of control hothead who let a verbal argument get to the point where you pulled out a gun just to prove that you were right. That may not be what happened, but that's what the jury's going to be told.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Who's responsible? Who do you think is responsible? I'm going to guess the parent. I mean, I think it's my responsibility with my kid to teach him to walk away. But would you say it's on the parents that are raising the kids nowadays, that they have to teach their kids that, hey, it's because, when I was growing up, my dad would be like, if a kid give you a hard time, punch him in the face, get rid of the bully. Whereas now it's more, hey, you know what? Is it really? Let the kid call you a name. Deal with it.
Yeah. And that's kind of a hard, because you don't want to raise your kids to be victims. Oh, someone's yelling at me. Someone's pushing me around. I'll go tell it, give them the options, I think, but, tell a teacher. But if it escalates, you may have to defend yourself.
So basically, it's last resort.
It is. And lethal force is only to be used in the gravest extreme. That's a book that the gentleman I mentioned, but Masad Ayub, that he wrote back in the 80s. And lethal force, there's a lot of people and a lot of firearm instructors that do a great job teaching you how to shoot a gun. They teach, a lot of ex-soldiers, even, ex-SEALs, ex-Green Berets, that are teaching people, here's how to survive a gunfight. They don't tell you how to survive the courtroom afterwards.
Okay.
And
that's the real fight.
Yeah, that's
the fight after the fight.
Because then you're fighting an opponent who has unlimited time and money to put into this. They can hire experts. They can drag this out for years. And depending on the jurisdiction you're in, you might get a district attorney that's a crusader that goes, we're going to prosecute every gun crime to the fullest extent of the law.
Yep.
And it's like, wait a minute, this is a classic clear-cut case of self-defense. Well, we're still going to prosecute. And you might run into a cop that says, I'm just going to make an arrest and let the jury decide. Because, the police don't want to be the one to go, it looked like self-defense to me, so I didn't make an arrest.
Yeah, well, cops are in a tough spot nowadays, I think.
Yeah.
It's really one of those thankless jobs, which I thank God for police officers, but I'd hate to be one right now with the difficulty especially if you had to defend yourself.
Yeah. And if you do, now, we've got our laws in the United States are a patchwork of 50 different states. So the self-defense laws in one state might be different than another. But here's a definition that'll probably you'd be all right in all 50 states, Canada, and that is self-defense using lethal force, whether it's a firearm or even an empty-handed technique. Using lethal force to defend yourself is only justified when faced with the immediate, otherwise unavoidable threat of death or serious bodily injury to the innocent. Some states don't leave that off. But again, if you're mouthing off with somebody, you being an innocent party can be eroded.
I get it.
So, yeah. Now,
how do you? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. But for that definition, to be in play, there are three conditions that all three of them simultaneously be met. You have to be faced with someone with the ability to cause death or serious bodily injury. And serious bodily injury has been defined as a crippling injury. So loss of eyesight, broken bones, that sort of thing. So they have to have the physical ability to cause you death or a crippling injury. They have to have the opportunity. And when it comes to opportunity, think distance and obstacles. So someone with a knife 100 yards away is not a threat. Someone on the other side of a 6-foot tall chain link fence with a knife that's threatening you, he's not a threat. If it's someone if you're within weapons range.
Yep.
Okay. The last component of that is intent. Would a reasonable person conclude, based on the other person's words or actions, that they intended to use that ability on you? If you see someone, you're in a diner somewhere and you see somebody with a gun in a holster, do they have the ability to cause you death? Yes. Do they have the opportunity? Are you in range? Sure. But they're just sitting there having breakfast.
Yep.
There's no intent. And, a reasonable person is what a jury is 12 reasonable people. And they're going to be the ones to decide, was that lawful or not?
Can you use lethal force if, we'll use the diner for an example. Someone goes into the diner and they have the gun to somebody else's head. Can I shoot the guy from behind to save that other person?
Yes, because you're allowed. Well, most states allow you to use lethal force to save another person. I can't think of any that don't. But my advice would be contact an attorney and do your own research on the laws. But yeah, there have been cases where people have seen come upon a violent attack. Somebody's in a park stabbing a woman and they shoot the other person. They shoot the assailant.
What do you do? All right. So we'll just stick with the diner. Guy walks into a diner, takes out a gun, puts it to the waitress. I shoot the guy. I happen to be a law-abiding citizen. I'm a good guy. Just happen to have a gun, right?
Right.
Legally. I shoot him. But as I get done shooting him, the cops have already arrived. Now they see me with a gun. What do I do in that scenario? What is so I don't get killed? I have a gun in my hand. The cops come in. What do I do?
But do everything that they tell you in a calm manner. When I was in the police academy, they gave us a lot of examples of plainclothes or off-duty officers getting killed by uniform cops because they didn't realize this guy was a cop. So even police get killed mistakenly. Mm-hmm. And this goes back to what we were saying before about if you're in your house, like you heard something go bump in the night, you call 911 and you're out clearing your house and the police arrive. Now they see a man with a gun. Shoot or not?
Yeah. It's you're picking yourself over that guy every time.
Yeah. And if you are not pointing a gun, let's say in that situation, a guy comes in and he's robbing the diner. You shoot him, you engage, he goes down, and you see the cops coming in, or you hear someone yelling behind you, don't turn and point the gun at them.
Okay. Should you drop the gun? Should I drop it?
Probably. If you hear someone yelling behind you, drop the gun. Yeah, go ahead and drop it, because that's probably a police officer who all he saw is you shoot somebody. And
I mean, should I get an attorney immediately?
Yes.
If I shot somebody to save somebody else, should I immediately not talk to them? Like, if they start asking me what happened, should I say I need an attorney?
Yes.
Or should I tell them what happened?
No. What people don't realize, okay, everyone's seen people get Mirandized 1,000 times on TV. Anything you say can be used against you. What the police don't tell you, and they don't have to tell you, is anything you say to the police that can help you in court, they are not allowed to say that in court. Nothing you say to the police can be used to help you. It's Federal Rule of Evidence 801.
Gotcha.
It's considered hearsay. So even if you were completely on the side of the angels, you were 100% innocent. Somebody kicked in your front door with an axe and was screaming at the top of his lungs he was going to kill everybody. You engaged, and then the police show up and go, what happened? Tell them, this guy kicked my door in, he had an axe, this is what he was doing. Okay, how did he get shot? Officer, I will cooperate fully with your investigation after I've had a chance to speak with my attorney. And then stop talking.
Okay, and you're going to get arrested?
Oh, yeah, you're going to get arrested.
But better to be arrested, get your attorney there, and to handle it that way.
Right. I'm a member of, there's the U.S. Concealed Carry Association, USCCA. And as part of my membership, I get access to their legal network. So if I am in a use of force situation, my first call is going to be to 911 to get police and medical en route. My second call is going to be to the USCCA, and I'm going to go, here's my name, here's my location, so they know which jail to look for me in, and I need an attorney. Now, we kind of briefly touched on that I'm used as an expert witness in use of force cases. I see a lot of people who did the right thing, but then when they're under the police interview, because we're at the end of a police interview, it's only going to end in one of two ways. You say something to the police that gives them probable cause to arrest you, or you ask for an attorney. That's it. Those are the only two ways that conversation is going to end. There are police interviews that have lasted 15 hours. Yeah.
So basically, in a nutshell, it's, hey, take me downtown, get my attorney.
Yeah. Or
whatever you would say, hey, I'm going to cooperate, but I need to talk to my attorney.
Right. And most cops at that point, it's either going to be you're arrested immediately, or, if it's something that happens in your house, they might go, okay, we don't have probable cause to arrest at this point. We're going to send it to the district attorney. But the time to get your version of what happened out there is not on scene after you just survived a critical incident where your adrenaline's up, your hands are shaking, you haven't mentally processed it yet. You know, remembering things sequentially has never been pertinent to our survival. So that's not an evolved trait. So you could be remembering things out of sequence until you've had time to decompress and think about it. There's a lot of police agencies where the unions have said if an officer is involved in a use of force, internal affairs cannot question them for at least 24 hours.
Yeah, they protect them. Makes sense.
Okay. And also, I had one case out of Portland where an elderly man, he's in his mid 60s, had a break-in at about 11:30 at night. He got arrested. The police started the interview at 5 o'clock in the morning. So here's a 65-year-old man who's been awake for almost 24 hours.
Poor guy.
And the interview lasted about an hour and a half. And you could tell he's out of gas. He's just exhausted at this point. He's giving one-word answers like, yeah, I guess. Mm-hmm. And the police finally, the detectives asked him, well, is it possible it happened this way and you just don't remember it?
Yep, I get it.
And at that point, and he's like, I guess. Oh, you just changed your answer.
Yeah, because he hasn't slept for almost 24 hours.
Right.
I get it. I'm junk. I'm junk after that too. Forget it.
Yeah. And the time to get your version of events is a couple days later with your attorney. Because imagine this, you hear something outside and you arm yourself and you go respond, and there's some guy with an axe screaming at you. He's screaming at invisible people you can't see. And he comes at you and you want to tell the police, yeah, I told him, drop the axe. He approached me. When he crossed my flower bed, he was really close. I felt I had no choice, so I shot him. But you're rattled. Your adrenaline's up. You're scared. What you might say to the police is, yeah, I saw this guy and he walked across my flower bed, and so I shot him.
Yep.
Oh, you shot him because he was walking on your flowers, not everything else. Then what happens? You go to court, you go to a grand jury, and they go, oh, well, your statement now is different. So after you've had a chance to talk with an attorney and cook up a statement, because any deviation from your original story, they're going to make it out that you're lying.
Man, there's a lot. There's a lot that goes into it. You really have to be alert. Because that might not be the first thing you might think of. If I, as an untrained person that's never shot somebody, if I end up shooting someone, I'm sure the first thing that's going through my head isn't attorney. I'm probably like, oh my God, I just killed somebody. I'm sure I couldn't even think of that. I mean, I forget it. I can't even imagine what it must feel like to.
And if you're a genuine good guy, you're not out causing problems. You look at the police as they're here to help. They're the good guys. And you're not going to realize what I say to them could get me in trouble.
Yeah. I mean, because they're trying to figure out who the bad guy is. They don't know if the guy I shot was the bad guy, right? They don't know if I'm the bad. Do you know what I mean? Like, they don't know. When they show up, they have no clue what's going on.
Yeah. They're going to pull up on scene and go, what happened? And there may be witness. You could have some looky-loo neighbor that goes, yeah, this guy just ran out of his house and shot this other guy for no reason. And she might not have seen anything at all. But now the police are going, okay, we got this one witness statement. And yeah, you're better off just telling the police, I will cooperate with your investigation after I've spoken to my attorney.
I feel like that's a good answer for any time you have an interaction with the police, no matter what it is. Like anything, you get pulled over for you hammered. You're like, I'm hurt. Take me to the hospital, and I want to speak to my attorney.
Yeah.
like anything. And it's nothing. Cops, I would like to make it. I mean, cops are not. I think, I don't know. I would just think that 99.9% of police officers are good guys and truly want to help find out who the bad person is and to help the community. So I'm not trying to on the police department, but they don't really know what they're walking into. I mean, even on a traffic ticket, they have no clue if you have a gun or not. It's a
Right.
tough thing.
And yeah, most cops that are killed during traffic stops.
That's just awful.
So yeah, when the cop pulls you over and walks up to your car, he's expecting, like, there's, this could be grandma that's out for a drive at 2 a.m., or this could be some gangbanger or some guy that's just looking to kill a cop. They have no idea what they're walking up on.
When you get pulled over for the ticket, I teach my kid this, and I do the same thing. I'm always, hands are on the steering. If it's night out, I flip the light on. My windows already rolled down before they get up there. My
and
hands
roll
are
all
on
your windows down.
all of them.
Yeah, especially if you have tinted windows in the back.
Yep.
Let them be able to see, okay, there's nobody back here.
Make them try to make them feel comfortable.
And, tell your passengers, if you have someone else in the car, put your hands on the dash, put your hands on your thighs, keep them in plain sight.
And, I usually, anytime they ask me to get my registration, I say, hey, my registration's in my glove. I'm going to get it now.
Mm-hmm.
My ID, it's usually with my phone. So, because I have like a little pocket on my phone, and my phone's usually in my center console. Like, my phone's in the center console. My ID is in there. I'm going to go get it now. Because I don't want to get shot. Who knows? Like what the hell?
Yeah.
Or tased. I don't want to be tased either.
Yeah. And, when I was a cop, I got pulled over one time. I blew through a yellow light. I was off. I should have stopped. I was completely at fault. I was in the wrong. I deserved getting a ticket.
Yep.
But, if the light turned yellow, I'm like, I ain't stopping. Cop pulls me over. And, so yeah, I turned the lights on, rolled the windows down, hands on the wheel, car off. And he's like, yeah, I saw you, because he was right behind me. I didn't even see him, but he's like, yeah, you blew through that yellow light. Need to see your license, registration, insurance. And I'm like, okay, my driver's license is in my wallet, which is on my right hip. I'm going to have to reach past my pistol to get to it. Is that okay?
What did he say to that?
He goes, yeah, just reach slowly. And when I unbuckled the seatbelt, he could see my badge. And then he's like, oh, you're good. Get out of here.
Oh, so he lets you go. I can't imagine if I could never do it. Every single time I pulled somebody over, I'd be like, I don't know if I would pull people over nowadays. I'm serious.
Yeah.
Unless it was egregious, unless it was like, all right, I have to pull this guy over because he's going to kill somebody. But if someone blew a yellow light, I'd probably be like, nah, probably not worth finding out whether or not this guy has a gun. Again, and then if you don't do it, but if you don't, and that guy goes and kills somebody, and then there's the camera footage of you letting that guy go at a stoplight, you're probably going to be held accountable for him
absolutely
going to commit a crime.
And what a lot of people don't realize with the police, when you're a sworn police officer, you have a duty to stop and to arrest. If someone commits a crime in front of you, you're not, by law, an officer is not allowed to let him walk away. Which is also why the police, we as private citizens are allowed to use reasonable force in order to protect ourselves and our loved ones.
Yep.
Police officers are allowed to use necessary force. So they're allowed to use not just force to protect themselves, but also force to overcome resistance and to transport someone to jail that's resisting and actively fighting. If we couldn't do that, if we saw a crime, we couldn't, and we said, okay, we're going to, citizens arrest, we're going to arrest you. Well, okay, that's assault.
Gotcha.
You didn't have to do that. But also, like, if, let's say someone does break into your house, you're at the top of the stairs with a gun and you hear someone rummaging around that isn't supposed to be there. You can just yell, "Hey, I've got a gun. Get out of the house. Take off." If a police officer thinks there's someone in your house, they can't walk away.
Got it.
They're not allowed to say, "Hey, just get out of here. Go be on your way."
They're bound to go to chase them, catch them, and try to
Yeah.
apprehend them.
Yeah.
Because it's Jesus. I don't know if
It's a tough job.
and I mean, even nowadays when you see, videos, because social media is a nightmare, and you see videos. I mean, I love social media, but you see people randomly shooting videos of cops detaining somebody, and it's totally taken out of context. And I get nervous that I'm like, at what point is the government going to make it like, because I feel like they embolden people to take on a police officer that they feel is using excessive force. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if a cop's
Yeah.
got a guy who's resisting arrest and someone's like, "Hey, you're being too aggressive," and then they try to engage, it's like, I feel like it's going to happen.
Yeah. And it has happened. And at that point, you're interfering with a lawful arrest. You're going to get detained. You may get an introduction to a police baton or pepper spray or.
I don't mean to laugh at hurting somebody, but it's
Yeah.
you're putting
But
yourself at I don't know. That's a thankless job. Being I love police officers. Thank you for being, and serving, but that's one of those jobs that I don't know that if my son was like, "Dad, I want to be a cop," police officer, I mean, I would encourage him to do it, but I'd sit down and say, "Hey, why don't you go talk to some other police officers and see what you're getting signed up for, so that
yeah.
you understand the responsibility and the power that you're going to have."
And realize that you may have to, by law, put yourself in harm's way.
That's What about, before unfortunately my stream thing only lasts so long because I have this thing called Yard Stream. I have to pay for it, and it only lets you record for so long. Before it boots me off, I think I got like another till it lets me do like an hour and 15 minutes. What about school shootings? And I know that's a loaded question. What I guess I would start with say, what do you think causes school shootings? And then the follow up on that would be, are there really as many school shootings as there seem to be? Like, how like hmm, when it's summertime and it's like, oh, there's a shark attack, but there's only like really 10 a year. And I'm not trying to minimalize it and say that it's not a bad thing. Just saying, is it pushed on us more than it
Well,
should be?
um, well, they're definitely happening. I think one of the reasons people pick schools is they're a soft target. They know, uh, and I think all of the school shooters have been students at the school. There may be, some outliers here and there where someone just goes, "I'm going to go to this school that I don't go to." But a school is a soft target. Um, I was at Fort Hood back in the early 2000s.
Yep.
And the schools on base after 9/11 had soldiers in full body armor with rifles outside the school pulling security. Nobody would ever think to be a school shooter at a elementary school on a military base, because you got soldiers right there.
I mean, should we do that at public schools? Should we have
Yes.
soldiers or National Guard or police officers or?
A lot of schools do have school resource officers there. There are some schools that where teachers who go through training and have passed the same qualification course as the police are allowed to carry firearms on campus. You don't know you don't know which teachers are armed.
It's it's almost like a U.S. Marshal on a plane. You don't know who the U.S. Marshal is, so you don't know what. I mean, maybe they should do that. What about tossing a U.S. Marshal in a school, like hidden like that? The English teacher is a police officer. Do you know what I'm saying? And like he gets paid to be a cop, but you know what? He has a master's degree in literature, and he's the guy.
I don't see anything wrong with that. And now there's a guy named John Lott. He's a statistician. He did a study on crime rates when people, as the ability of private citizens to carry concealed weapons became more of a thing. And, anti-gun people kept saying, hey, if we allow people to have concealed carry, it's going to be the Wild West. Guns are going to be broken out at traffic arguments. It's going to be terrible. What he found is more guns means less crime. About 10 years ago, there was a shooting at a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
He picked that theater because there was another theater that he was looking at, but the theater he went to had a sign that said no concealed carry, no firearms. He picked it because he knew no one was going to have a gun.
So that's basically, it's almost the same thing you were saying at the beginning of our conversation, that Japan didn't want to attack the mainland because they knew that the citizens were armed. So it's the
Right.
same thing with picking a place that you're going to shoot up. You say, well, I mean, I'm not going to go shoot up a police station because there's armed people there.
Right. And there was a county in Florida, I think this was in the 80s. Florida was, I think, the first state to allow shall issue, meaning the concealed carry process for most states used to be the chief of police had to decide whether or not to give you a permit. The result of that is political cronies got permits, regular citizens did not. Florida says no, unless you're a convicted felon or have been found to be mentally incompetent, they have to give you the permit. And after they did that, in this one county, there was a lot of rapes going on, very well publicized. What the sheriff did was he invited any woman to come get their permit and to get trained. And they highly publicized that there's a lot of women out there now who have been trained to carry a firearm, and they're packing. Rapes dropped.
Yeah, you bet they did.
Yeah, it's like,
So
yeah.
Who should be able to get a gun and who shouldn't? Or maybe the better question is, who should not be able to get a gun, to get a permit to own a gun?
I think anybody who's mentally incompetent shouldn't have a gun. People who have a violent temper probably shouldn't have a gun. But it's one of those things where, how do you prove, until someone commits an act that says they shouldn't have one, it's really hard to say, yeah, I don't think this guy should have one.
Criminals, no guns. Well, I guess if you stole bread, you should be able to get a
Right.
gun. But like I'm saying,
And
you committed a serious felony, attacked somebody, you've been convicted of rape, child abuse, anything like stuff like that.
yeah, most of the time, if you have a misdemeanor conviction, you can carry a firearm unless it's for domestic violence. If you have a felony conviction, no guns. That's the way the law currently is set up.
And that's federal. Everybody, all states, because I know each state has their own little other sub laws.
Right, but you're not going to be able to legally purchase a firearm if you have a felony conviction, or have been found mentally incompetent, or are out on any kind of pretrial release, or have a restraining order for domestic violence.
Okay, and before, because this thing's going to run out. I honestly don't know if it's going to shut off now in a minute or not. But
okay,
should assault? No, I don't want to call them assault weapons because that's not what they really are. Should semi-automatic guns be banned? Should people be allowed to own them?
Absolutely, people should be allowed to own fully automatic, and in Oregon, you can own fully automatic. There's never been a case of, other than like in the Roaring 20s with the gangsters, of people using fully automatic weapons Well, now there actually have been a couple, but it's rare. And people who get permits to own automatic weapons don't use them in crimes. It's just like people who, what they found is that average citizens who get a concealed carry permit commit less crimes than police officers. They've been through background checks. They're more of who you'd want carrying a gun. So I don't think, it's not the gun, it's how it's used.
So it's the person, basically.
It's the person.
It's the person.
And
okay.
One thing to keep in mind, let's say, for example, an AR-15. For a 110-pound woman in her home, that may be the best self-defense option she has, because it's got less recoil than a shotgun. It's more easily managed. It's going to be more accurate. And she's not going to be as afraid to use it. My sister a couple years ago took a class for women in firearms. They went out to a range and shot a bunch of different kinds of guns. When it got to the AR-15, she was like, wow, this is going to be, a big deal. This is, because she's seen them on the movies and whatnot. Once they actually got to shoot it, she was like, that's it. Yeah, that's it.
So I get it. So there's not much pushback. So at what point, because listen, Biden wants to get rid of these semi-automatic weapons. He certainly doesn't want people to have automatic weapons. What is a gun that's too much for the public? Is there a gun that's like, hey, the public shouldn't have this?
Probably. Well, it's not the gun, but the ammunition, things like grenade launchers. You can, like in some states, like for example, Oregon, you can have a flare launcher. You can use them to shoot flares or what they call bird bombs.
Yeah. Yep.
But an explosive, like a high explosive fragmentary device, no, you can't have that.
Well, like a Gatling gun. I don't even know if those things exist anymore, but you don't think should someone be able to have one of those?
People do, with permits. But remember, they've been through a background check. If you have an automatic weapon, the ATF can come to your house at any time and say, show us the gun and show us the paperwork. And if the paperwork is not stored with the gun, it's not stored properly, now we're confiscating it.
Let me just real quick, is that only automatic, or is that any type of gun? ATF can show up at any time if you own a gun.
If that's registered, firearms that are in their purview. So if it's a short-barreled rifle, a short-barreled, like a sawed-off shotgun, or an automatic, a fully automatic. And just so people know, fully automatic means you hold the trigger down, it keeps shooting until you run out of bullets. Semi-automatic, one round fired for one pull of the trigger.
Okay, and so semi-automatic doesn't fall under their purview, but automatic does.
Automatic does.
Okay.
So, a lot of people own automatic weapons. There are clubs you can go to in Colorado, Vegas, different places where if you want to shoot a belt-fed machine gun, you can. If you want to shoot an electric, a minigun, like the kind you saw in Predator.
Yep.
You can go shoot those.
Speaking of that,
they're highly controlled.
What's and then this will be it. I'm sorry, I keep saying this will be it, but because you brought up a movie, what movie has the most realistic gunplay in it? If you could, if you're in you like watching a movie, you're like, man, that actually is how it really works.
Heat,
great movie.
Yeah, great movie. The bank robbery scene in that. Val Kilmer doing the combat reload. For small unit tactics, that is probably one of the best movies out there.
Is that how it really happens? The way they use the guns is that like, hey, that's real life, as opposed to like, John Wick, which,
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think John Wick is really real life when you like dive in and you can drop, you know what I mean?
yeah. I mean, John Wick. Actually, part of that's because he went to a guy named Terran Tactical. Like he got good training, but a lot of what the action sequences, they put things together that each component is real, but it's all strung together. It's like then it kind of becomes almost cartoon violence.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I think Heat was very realistic. Especially one of the scenes where they show Val Kilmer shooting um, on full automatic. He loads, shoots for about a second and a half, and has to reload because he's out of ammunition. Because a lot of people don't realize, because you see in the movies, people shoot, 200 bullets
Yes.
before they have to reload, or they never
Yep.
reload. It's like, and you start. This goes back, to the cowboy movies where you see some guy shoot 15 bullets out of a 6 gun. It's like
Yeah.
he kind of has to reload at some point.
It is pretty. It is. It's funny because you sit back and you're like, wait, how many bullets does this guy have? Like because
Yeah,
I play like video games. Well, I don't really, but my son does, and one of them's Resident Evil, and I have no clue with the guns, but I like you can look down and say, okay, I got 6 bullets, and I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I have to reload. So
yeah.
I mean, I know it's not real life, but
Another movie that's pretty good is 13 Hours.
what is it?
13 Hours.
I've never seen it.
It's about the contractors who were providing security in Benghazi.
I'll have to check. Who's in it? Is it some?
John Krasinski, um, uh, James Dale Badge. But it's about they were contractors who were protecting a CIA base in Benghazi, Libya, that was overrun in 2012 on September 11th.
Oh, so it's the based on the true story.
Based on a true story.
Yeah. You know what? After we're done here, I'll probably watch it before I go pick my daughter up.
Yeah,
Well,
that was
stop watching it.
that was the event where, when it was over, the State Department put out, "Oh, this was in response to a YouTube video." It's like there was no protest. It's like that was a coordinated attack.
Yeah. No, now has it been proven, or is it's never, how can you ever prove what the government does? You don't know.
Yeah,
That's a tough thing, dude. They could come out and be like, "Oh, the sky is red." And there'd be half the people in the country'd say, "Yep, sky's red." So those are
yeah.
tough. Those are tough conversations. But all right, listen, I gotta hop off.
Okay,
I really appreciate you coming on. If you don't mind, I'd like to reach out from time to time if
absolutely.
certain gun topics come up. How do people get, what do you have anything that you want to promote, or how do people read your stuff?
Um, Most of my books, or not books, articles, they can, if they're a member of USCCA, they can read them online. Um, I have some links on like my LinkedIn channel, but um, yeah, pretty much just through the USCCA, they can get a hold of my articles, and there's some that have been republished other places online too.
And what if they want to hire you as an expert?
Um, if an attorney or somebody is in a use of force situation and they want to hire me, they can reach out. Um, my email is robertson.schuyler.p@gmail.com. You can check the spelling there on the screen, and yeah, they can get in touch with me. Or I have had attorneys get in touch with me through USCCA. They actually reach out to the editors and go, "Hey, this guy that wrote this article, we'd like to hire him."
Perfect. All right. Well, hey man, I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I'd be happy to come on anytime.
Schuyler, thank you.
Thank you very much.